At first glance, Augmented looked like any other AR app. Basic interface, a camera overlay, a loading bar pulsing with a faint bluish light. But the moment it launched, the air in my room felt heavier, like the atmosphere had shifted a few degrees off from normal. Through my phone screen, the room looked different. Slight distortions rippled across the walls, and faint symbols began to shimmer just beneath the surface of familiar objects. My desk, the lamp, even the folds of my blanket. Then I noticed something in the far corner, something the naked eye couldn't see, but that the app rendered clearly. It was a figure, tall, shadowy. It stood still, but I felt it move. Not in body, but in presence, its awareness brushing up against mine, like cold fingertips sliding across the back of my neck. My hand trembled, but I didn't look away. A message appeared on the screen. "Welcome, Seeker. You've unlocked Layer 1. The environment was in absolute silence, except for the soft buzzing of my phone. I sat on the edge of the bed, turning off all the lights as the app recommended. The screen cast a pale glow across my face, the only source of illumination in the otherwise pitch-black room. Augmented was already running, its interface pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. A message blinked at the bottom. "Calibration complete. Prepare for alignment." I didn't know what that meant, but something in me, curiosity or maybe something deeper, more primal, urged me to keep going. I slowly raised the phone and scanned the room through the camera. At first, nothing. Just the grainy black and white of night mode, static clinging to the edges of reality. Then something shifted. A wall that should have been solid flickered like a weak hologram. Symbols, thin, angular, almost mechanical, etched themselves across the floor in a pattern I didn't recognize. The temperature dropped. Another message appeared, this one in red. "Do not speak, do not move. Layer 2 is observing." My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't noticed it before, but in the far corner of the room, just outside the reach of the phone's light, a shape began to take form. Not human, not entirely. Tall, twisted as if built from pieces of wrong geometry. And even though it made no sound, I could feel it pressing against my thoughts, prying at the edges of my mind like fingers searching for cracks. I wanted to turn off the app. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but I couldn't. Something in the app, in it, wouldn't let me. The app used the camera to overlay invisible layers of reality. At first, I only saw bright particles floating around the room like enchanted dust caught in a beam of moonlight. They shimmered gently, swirling in patterns I couldn't quite follow. Too precise to be random, too fluid to be artificial. I moved the phone slowly, sweeping across the room. The particles reacted to the motion, drawing closer together in certain areas as if pulled by an unseen force. It felt almost peaceful, beautiful even. Like I was peering into some hidden harmony woven into the fabric of the world. But then, something changed. The particles began clustering near the door. At first, just a few, then dozens, then hundreds, until they formed a dense, flickering shape. It was tall, vaguely humanoid, but constantly shifting, like a body made of static and starlight. And even though it had no face, I felt its attention snap toward me. A new overlay appeared on the screen. "Threshold approaching. Do not break eye contact." I froze. The thing moved. Slow, gliding, silent, passing through the closed door as if it wasn't there. I wanted to blink, to look away, to breathe, but the app pulsed again, more urgently. "Remain still. It is counting." My fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't know what it was counting. Seconds. Heartbeats, lives. All I knew was that the particles were no longer beautiful. They were watching, and something behind them was waiting. But something changed when I pointed the phone at the mirror. The image shook, a tremor passing through the reflection, as if reality itself hesitated for just a fraction of a second. And then for a moment, something distorted it. The edges of my own face bent and flickered, like a signal lost in static, warping in ways that didn't feel human. I blinked, hoping it was just a glitch in the app, a bug, some sort of programming error. Maybe I'd moved too quickly, or the camera had failed to adjust. I wanted to believe that, But the reflection didn't correct itself. Instead, it lingered, stretched and fractured, until a shadow, a thin, crawling figure began to form behind me. It wasn't visible in the room, not with my own eyes, but in the mirror. It was undeniable. The shape was tall, elongated, and vaguely human in silhouette. Yet its presence felt wrong, alien, like something that didn't belong. I took a step back, the phone shaking in my hand. The reflection mirrored my movement, but the shadow didn't move with me. It stood still, watching. Then, without warning, the app flashed a new message. Error detected, reflection unstable. I dropped the phone onto the bed, heart pounding in my chest. The shadow in the mirror flickered just for a moment, like a signal desperately trying to stabilize. My reflection, my real reflection, was unchanged, but the shadow was not mine. It tilted its head, as if studying me. I turned to face the mirror, fully expecting to see nothing more than the calm reflection of the room, the empty space behind me. But when I looked, it was gone. Everything was still, too still. Then I saw it. A figure behind me, dark, tall, with arms that were far too long. It stood motionless like a grotesque sculpture carved from shadow and silence, its limbs stretched unnaturally, twitching faintly as though they were struggling to stay in place, to not collapse under their own grotesque length. I froze. It didn't exist in the real mirror, at least not with my eyes. But on the screen of the phone it was there, clear, defined. It stood just behind my shoulder, its hollow gaze never leaving me. The screen seemed to distort further, warping the room around it, making the figure appear even more unsettling. I took a shaky breath, moving slightly to the left, but the figure remained in the same spot, perfectly aligned with the camera's view. The app was no longer just a tool. It was showing me something that shouldn't be possible, something that shouldn't exist. The arms, impossibly long, dropped towards the ground, brushing against the floor with a sound that was like a whisper of static, far too faint for me to hear. But the phone's screen reacted, rippling in time with it. Another message flashed across the screen. It is aware. Do not engage. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling against the edges of the phone. I wanted to run, to scream, but I was rooted to the spot. The figure was staring at me, its unblinking, hollow eyes fixed on mine, its presence far too real, far too close. And then, as if it had heard my thoughts, its head tilted, just slightly, an unnatural jerking movement, and its lips, if they could be called that, curled into a smile. It wasn't a smile of kindness or malice. It was the smile of something other, something that knew exactly what it was doing and what I was about to do. I looked away. The figure didn't vanish, but when I dared glance back at the phone, it was gone. Nothing on the screen but my own shaking reflection. I turned quickly. Nothing there. The room was exactly as I had left it, the walls bare, the dim light from the street filtering through the window. The silence, thick and suffocating, seemed to mock me. No shadow, no movement, no sign of the thing I had just seen. But the app, clearly showed the presence. The same dark, towering figure, only now it was closer. Much closer. The screen flickered as I stared, the image distorting once again, like static trying to stabilize. The figure was no longer behind me. It was directly beside me, its elongated arms hanging just inches from my shoulder. I could see its fingers, impossibly long, twitching at the edges of the screen, as if it were trying to reach through the phone itself. I felt its presence before I saw it. My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding in a frantic rhythm. The app showed no mercy. Every second the figure inched closer, its proximity overwhelming. I could almost feel the air around me grow colder, the temperature in the room plummeting. I glanced to my left. Nothing. The room was still, but the app was showing me something different. The figure was now so close that the tips of its fingers brushed against the edge of the screen. The reflection in the app warped in ways that defied logic, stretching, bending in places that shouldn't bend. It sees you, the app flashed with a sudden urgency. It knows. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone away, but my hand wouldn't move. It was as if the app had a hold on me now, like the figure was inside my mind, pulling my thoughts toward it. A low, almost inaudible hum emanated from the phone like a distant whisper. No, not distant. It was getting closer too. I reached out to touch the screen, desperate to end this, to break free from whatever hold it had on me. But just as my finger hovered above the glass, the figure, its eyes moved. It wasn't staring at me anymore. It was looking directly at the camera, at me, not the reflection. The app's interface cracked, splitting in two. My own face was no longer in the reflection. Instead, I saw nothing. Blackness, empty space. And behind that, the figure. It stepped forward. And the image started to corrupt. Horizontal lines cut across the screen, jagged and chaotic, distorting the view. It was as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to tear, the phone struggling to contain whatever it was showing me. The flickering grew more intense, faster, until the screen seemed ready to implode under the weight of whatever force was pressing against it. The figure, the dark, impossibly tall silhouette, flickered with it. Its edges shimmered and warped, distorting like a bad television signal, but the movement was unmistakable. It was trying to cross the boundary between the digital and the real. Each flicker seemed like a desperate attempt to break through the camera, to force its way into the room, to pull itself from the confines of the screen into my world. I stepped back, my hands trembling, the phone still in my grip but feeling heavier, like a lead weight. My heart raced in sync with the glitching image, the figure now so close it almost consumed the screen entirely. Its limbs stretched unnaturally, far beyond the dimensions of the phone, fingers flicking toward the edges, reaching for something. No, someone. The air grew thick, oppressive, a coldness settling over the room that sent shivers crawling up my spine. The hum from the phone grew louder, more insistent, like a low growl vibrating through my bones. The lines on the screen multiplied, warping the image even further, making the figure's features blur, flicker, and shift. Its eyes, those hollow black pits, widening as it came closer. I wanted to shut it off, to run. But the app, no, the figure would not let me. A final, violent flicker tore through the screen. The figure's arm shot forward, stretching impossibly long, its fingers nearly grazing the edges of the glass. My breath caught in my throat, and then just as quickly as it had started, the image froze. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. The app went black. The room around me was still, but the air was different, heavier, as though something had changed, shifted. My phone was silent, but the presence lingered, thick and suffocating in the space between us. I wasn't alone anymore. It had a melted face like dripping wax. The contours of its features were misshapen, as if the very essence of its face had collapsed in on itself, leaving only a grotesque, amorphous mask. The skin, if it could even be called that, hung loosely, dripping downward in thick, glistening streaks. It was as if time itself had forgotten to stop the decay. There were no eyes, just deep, endless holes where its gaze should have been. Hollow, black voids that seemed to stare right through me, bypassing my body, my thoughts, my very soul. Those dark pits didn't blink, didn't waver. They watched unblinking, as if they were privy to every secret I had ever kept, every fear I had buried, every doubt I had whispered to myself in the dark. I could feel the weight of its stare, crawling across my skin, burrowing deep inside. The air around me grew heavy, oppressive, as though it were thickening with its presence. A chill gripped my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. It knew me. I could feel it. It wasn't just looking at me, it was looking into me, dissecting my thoughts, my memories, my deepest corners. I stepped back, my legs unsteady, my mind racing for an explanation. Any reason why this thing, this nightmare, was standing before me. But the app had gone black. There were no more glitches, no more messages. The phone in my hand was now silent, dead, as if it had become nothing more than an inanimate object. The figure didn't move, but I felt it shift in the room, like a dark cloud hovering just beyond my reach. Its presence grew, encroaching on my thoughts, suffocating them. Every part of me screamed to look away, to run, to escape. But I couldn't. My feet were planted to the ground, my body frozen in place by something far stronger than fear. It took a step forward, then another, closer, closer, until I could feel the temperature drop, the space around me growing frigid. The air felt heavy in my chest. I could hear its voice now, not through my ears but in my mind, soft and cold, like a whisper in the depths of a nightmare. I know you. A violent shiver ran through my body. Every muscle tensed, every nerve screamed in protest, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched thin. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming thick, suffocating. The air grew dense, heavy, pressing down on me, like a weight that threatened to crush me under its pressure. It felt as though something was building up in the space around me, slowly, methodically, like the approach of an inevitability I couldn't escape. The silence was no longer comforting. It was oppressive. My breath came in shallow gasps, each inhale feeling like I was sucking in smoke from a fire I couldn't see. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in around me, but the shadows seemed to stretch and writhe, moving with a life of their own. I glanced at the phone in my hand. The screen was still dark, but I could feel its presence pulsing against my palm. It wasn't just a device anymore. It was a conduit, a bridge to something else, something far darker than anything I had imagined. The figure, that thing, was still there, though now it wasn't just in the reflection. It was in the air. Its essence lingered like a fog, wrapping around me, seeping into every crack and crevice. The absence of eyes, those deep, endless holes, was replaced by an overwhelming sense of being watched, not just by one thing, but by a presence far greater than I could comprehend. The temperature dropped even further, biting into my skin, turning my breath into a cloud of vapor. I could hear something now, too. Soft, almost imperceptible whispers that didn't come from anywhere in particular. They came from everywhere, threading through the air, curling around me, feeding into the growing dread that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I looked toward the mirror, my body screaming at me not to, but my eyes betrayed me. It was there. The face, melted and dripping, was closer now. I could almost feel its cold, waxen skin brush against my own as it leaned in, its hollow eyes waiting. The air shifted once more, thickening until it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. And then, I heard it. A voice, deep and gravelly, not spoken aloud but felt in the deepest parts of my soul. It is almost time. Still, I kept recording. My hand trembled, but the phone stayed glued to my palm, as if it were somehow attached to me, like a tether I couldn't sever. The screen flickered again, casting odd reflections of the room, distorted, fractured glimpses of the world around me, as though the boundaries between here and there were slowly dissolving. It was as if a part of me was no longer in control, as if my body had betrayed me, forcing my fingers to move, to hold the camera steady, even as every part of me screamed to stop, to run, to throw the phone away and never look back. But I couldn't. I couldn't look away. I couldn't stop myself from watching. Something in me, something deep and primal, needed to see it through to the end. What end? I didn't know, but it was like I had already crossed a line, a point of no return, and there was no turning back now. The air felt thicker, as though the very molecules were slowing down, compressing into something heavy, almost tangible. My pulse hammered in my ears, louder than the whispers that now filled the room. Every breath I took was ragged, strained, like I was trying to inhale in a vacuum. The figure, that thing, was closer now, its form blurring and flickering on the screen, its long arms reaching out toward me, toward the phone. The melted face, dripping like wax, seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own, as though it were alive, breathing. The absence of eyes didn't matter anymore because I could feel it watching me, feeling me, as if it knew exactly what I was thinking, what I was afraid of. My finger hovered over the screen, but I couldn't stop the recording, couldn't stop the app from showing me the impossible, the unspeakable, and yet in the back of my mind I understood. I had to finish this. I had to keep recording. It was almost like I was part of it now. I pointed the phone at the door. Nothing. The frame of the door was empty, the same as it had always been. The room felt eerily still, the silence pressing against my ears. I moved the phone upwards, directing the camera at the ceiling. Still. Nothing. The shadows up there remained undisturbed, as if the world beyond the lens had simply refused to acknowledge the app's presence. But when I returned to the mirror, the figure was beside me. Too close. I froze, the phone shaking in my hand. The screen displayed the reflection, or what should have been the reflection, but the figure was no longer confined to the edges of the mirror. It had crossed the threshold. Its long, distorted limbs stretched toward me, the cold, waxen face hanging just inches from mine, its hollow, empty eye sockets burrowing deep into my skin. The air went cold, no, freezing, and I could feel the presence behind me, its breath a sickening, invisible weight pressing against my neck. My own reflection was barely visible now, overshadowed by the looming shape beside me. The phone screen flickered violently, like it couldn't handle the proximity, like the boundaries between the app's world and my own were shattering. I tried to move, to step back, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like I was caught in a trance, my legs refusing to lift, my fingers frozen to the phone. The figure didn't move at first. It simply stood there, too close. So close I could feel the coldness of its presence seep into my bones, each heartbeat echoing in my chest, thundering louder than the silence around us. Then, it did move. A slow, deliberate shift of its head, tilting to one side as if studying me, watching me. And then its lips, if they could be called that, twitched upward into something resembling a smile so wide it seemed to stretch the very fabric of its face, the melted wax pulling and twisting like it was being pulled into something darker, something more sinister. And the worst part was, it wasn't just the app anymore. It wasn't just a distorted reflection. It felt real. I could almost feel the coldness of its fingers brushing against my skin, the pressure of its gaze forcing the air out of my lungs. The app flashed one last message before it died out, the screen turning black. It has come. You cannot escape. I felt a hot, slow breath on my neck. The air was thick and heavy, almost suffocating, as if the very atmosphere had been infected by something wrong. The heat of it curled around my skin, sending a wave of icy terror straight to my spine. It was close. Too close. A presence, tangible and unsettling, right behind me. Without thinking, I spun around in desperation, nearly dropping the phone from my shaking hands. The screen jerked, the image glitching for a split second, but there was nothing behind me, just emptiness. I stood there, breathing heavily, staring into the cold void of the room. The walls seemed to close in, the silence amplifying the pounding of my heart in my ears. There was no figure, no twisted form, no shadow looming over me. Just the empty, undisturbed space of my room. I almost laughed in disbelief, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me, until I looked back at the phone. The app flickered again and the screen, the mirror, wasn't reflecting the room. It was reflecting me, but I was no longer alone. There it was, the figure. It was standing beside me, its distorted face too close, a grotesque mockery of humanity. Its arms hung down unnaturally, reaching toward me, its fingers twitching as if they were testing the air, the hot breath I had felt before. It wasn't just a sensation. It was coming from it, from the thing that shouldn't exist. I froze, the phone trembling in my grip. I didn't dare look away, didn't dare move. As the figure tilted its head slowly, almost like it was savoring my fear. It didn't make a sound, didn't need to. I could feel it like a cold weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me from within. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it shifted. The air went cold, the presence drawing closer as if it were stepping from the screen and into my reality. I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body, my mind, was paralyzed, trapped by the same force that had been controlling my every action. The last thing I saw, just before the app went black, was its smile. It stretched wide enough to break the mask of melted flesh, revealing a yawning abyss inside. And the whisper, a voice cold and familiar slithering into my thoughts. "You can't escape me, not anymore." When I looked back at the screen, the creature's face was pressed against mine. Its features were a grotesque mass of melted flesh, dripping and sagging, but its eyes, those empty black voids, were still fixed on me. The phone screen shook violently, the image warping as if reality itself was struggling to contain the thing on the other side. I gasped, recoiling instinctively. But the creature's face remained there, impossibly close, its grotesque mouth opening in silence. No sound came from it, yet the very air around me seemed to grow thick, heavy, as if the creature was trying to push itself into my world beyond the screen. Then I felt it, a low, rumbling frequency. It wasn't a sound I could hear, not with my ears, but it was there, resonating deep in my chest. The vibrations were subtle at first, just a hum, but soon it grew stronger, pulsing through the air. My teeth rattled, my bones ached with the intensity of it. It felt as if the entire room was vibrating, as if the very glass of the window was being shaken by the force of the creature's presence. I turned to look at the window. The glass was trembling, the faintest cracks appearing along its surface, as if the pressure from the thing on the screen was making everything around me break apart. The air itself seemed to warp, bending the light and distorting my vision. My heart raced in panic, my body begging me to move, to do something, anything. But I was rooted in place, paralyzed by the weight of the creature's gaze. It didn't make a sound, but I felt it. Felt its mouth stretch wider, as if savoring my fear, as if it were feeding off of it, drawing me deeper into its grip. I tried to look away, but the phone wouldn't let me. My eyes wouldn't leave the screen. The creature's face was now mere inches from mine, the cracks in the window expanding as if its presence were too much for the room to contain. And then, as if on cue, the whisper came. A voice, not from the phone, but from somewhere inside my mind, cold and echoing. "You are already mine." The room was shaking now, the glass vibrating so violently I thought it might shatter at any second. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. The phone screen flickered and the creature's face was gone, but I could still feel it. It was still there, watching me, waiting. My fingers froze. No matter how hard I tried to move them, they wouldn't obey. The phone felt cold against my skin, like it had become part of me. Or worse, like it had become a part of whatever was controlling it now. I pressed the home button, swiped the screen, tried everything to shut the app down, but nothing worked. The phone controls didn't respond. It was as if the device itself was no longer mine to command, like it had fallen under the influence of something far beyond the digital world it once belonged to. My heart pounded louder, faster, as I watched the app screen continue to flicker and distort. The creature's face, that melted, twisted mockery of life, still loomed over me in the reflection. But it wasn't just on the screen anymore. I could feel its presence, its essence pressing in on the room, like it was slipping through the cracks, reaching into the physical world from wherever it was coming from. I swiped furiously at the screen, desperate to close the app, but every gesture was met with resistance. The interface wouldn't budge. The phone's surface grew colder, the screen pulsing with an eerie glow that felt wrong, like it was breathing, alive in its own way. Each time I touched the controls, the phone vibrated once, twice, as though it was being used by something else. Something that knew how to operate it better than I did. The creature's face was now stretched and twisted, its mouth opening wider, its silent scream echoing in my mind. But this time it wasn't just in the reflection. The air around me thickened, grew heavier. I could almost hear its presence moving in the room, like something unseen brushing against my skin, cold and suffocating. I tried to throw the phone across the room, but my arm wouldn't move. I couldn't drop it. It was as if I wasn't the one holding it anymore. The screen flickered once more, And then the message appeared. Red, bold, and unblinking. You cannot escape. You are part of this now. The words didn't just appear on the screen. They echoed inside my mind, as if the app itself had spoken to me, not through the device, but through something deeper, something far more terrifying. And that's when I realized I wasn't controlling the phone. It was controlling me. The figure started walking across the screen. Its long, distorted limbs moved with an unnatural, jerky grace, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. The app flickered and pulsed with each step it took, the reflection in the glass twisting as if the creature was trying to force its way through the digital barrier. But something shifted. Even with the phone lowered, my hands trembling as I tried to distance myself from it, I could hear it. The footsteps, slow, unsteady. A heavy, dragging sound echoed across the wooden floor, each step deliberate, each movement bringing it closer. My breath caught in my throat, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The sound wasn't coming from the phone. It wasn't in the app. It was in the room with me. Tap, drag, tap. The footsteps grew louder, uneven, as if the figure was stumbling forward, its limbs twisted and broken. It felt as though the walls of my room were being distorted by its presence, the sound reverberating through the air, vibrating the floor beneath my feet. I dared to glance around, the phone still clutched in my shaking hands. The screen now dark, but the footsteps didn't stop. They were right behind me. I could hear them moving closer, a sickening scrape against the wooden planks like something heavy dragging across the floor. The noise was impossible to ignore. It filled the room, took over my senses, made it feel as though the air itself was shaking. I turned sharply, my pulse pounding in my ears. But nothing. The room was empty. No creature, no distorted figure. Just the quiet hum of the world around me. And then I heard it again. The footsteps. They were closer now. Closer than before. I could feel them beneath me, as if the creature was right there on the other side of the wall, moving toward me with purpose. Tap, drag, tap. It was coming for me. The sounds came from all sides. At first it was subtle, like the faint scraping of something dragging across the floor. Then it grew louder, faster, as if the creature was circling me. The tap, drag, tap echoed, bouncing off the walls, reverberating through the room. It was impossible to pinpoint where it was coming from, but it felt like it was everywhere. The walls, the floor, the very air seemed to tremble with the sound. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, eyes wide, scanning every inch of the room. The space was still, the same as it had been just moments ago. The bed, the desk, the windows, everything was in its place. Everything should have been normal, but something was off. The room was empty, or at least it seemed to be. I stood frozen, my breath shallow, listening intently. The footsteps, no, they weren't just footsteps now, were joined by whispers. Low, guttural voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The words were garbled, indistinct, but there was something familiar in them, something that made my skin crawl. They sounded like my name. I whipped my head around again, heart racing, but there was nothing. Nothing but the shadows stretching across the walls, darker than they should have been, moving as if they were alive, responding to the sound, to the presence. Then, the sound shifted. A thud. It came from the corner of the room, followed by a soft, dragging scrape, like the figure was dragging itself along the floor, inching closer with each movement. I could feel its presence, the weight of it pressing in from all directions. But still, when I looked, there was nothing there. The room was empty, silent, still, but I could feel it. It was there. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping rapidly, and the whispers grew louder. I could almost make them out now, their tone shifting, growing more desperate, more alive. Look. The voice wasn't from the phone anymore. It wasn't a glitch or an app malfunction. It was real. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise as I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the room once more, my heartbeat echoing in my skull. And that's when I saw it. In the corner of my eye, just in the edge of my vision where the shadows pooled, movement, something slithering, something unnatural. A form crawling across the floor inch by inch, making its way toward me. I blinked, and it was gone. But I knew. It was watching me. The absolute silence was broken by a single sound. 3 dry knocks on the closet door. Knock, knock, knock. Each one echoed through the room, sharp and cold, like a signal. A warning. The noise seemed to freeze the air around me, as if the room itself held its breath. I didn't move, I couldn't. My body was paralyzed, every instinct screaming for me to run, to hide, to do something. But my fingers, my hands, they were glued to the phone. I couldn't look away from the screen. I just pointed the camera. The lens shook as I held it up, my breathing ragged, shallow. Through the tiny screen, I could see the closet door in front of me, standing slightly ajar. The same door I had passed 100 times without a second thought. But now it was different. The air around it felt thick, heavy, as if something unseen was pressing against it, trying to break through. The knocks echoed in my mind, louder now, as if the very walls were starting to vibrate with the sound. But when I glanced at the screen, there was nothing. No shadow, no movement, just the empty door, just the empty room. But I knew better than to believe what I saw. The air had changed. It was colder now, and the silence that followed the knocks was deafening. The tension in the room was suffocating, crawling under my skin like an itch I couldn't scratch. The app flickered briefly, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move inside the closet. A blur, a shadow, something just out of reach of the camera's lens. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The closet door creaked, ever so slightly, as though something inside was shifting. I raised the camera higher, my hands shaking violently. The app's screen was static, blurry. I couldn't see anything clearly, but I could feel it. The presence, the weight of something there, waiting. Then, it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the closet, louder, more urgent this time. It wasn't the sound of wood against wood. It was something else, something far more unnatural. My heart skipped a beat, my chest tightening with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. I didn't dare move the phone away. I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen, even as my mind screamed at me to look away, to run, to do anything but stay there. The app flickered once more, and then a figure, a shape, in the closet. It was there, and it was watching me. The figure was inside. It wasn't just standing there, hiding in the shadows. It was leaning from behind the door, its body unnaturally bent, as if its bones had been twisted in ways they shouldn't be. The closet door creaked under its weight, groaning in protest, but the figure didn't seem to care. Its face, if you could even call it that, was a nightmare. A grotesque mockery of a smile stretched across its features, too wide, too jagged. Thin, long teeth, far too many for any human mouth, protruded from its lips, their tips sharp and glistening like shards of glass. The eyes were hollow, black pits, void of anything resembling a soul, but the smile, that smile was everything. It was hungry. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if it was amused, enjoying my fear, savoring the moment. And then it grinned wider. I couldn't breathe. The phone in my hands was now trembling violently, the screen flickering, distorting as the figure moved ever so slightly, like it was pushing itself forward, inching closer through the gap in the door. The app on my phone buzzed once, a low hum that resonated deep within my chest. And then, it froze. The screen went still. The image of the creature frozen in place, that twisted, mocking grin locked in an eternal smile. My heart pounded in my ears as I tried to move my fingers, tried to force the app to respond, but it didn't. Then the phone screen went black. Complete darkness. I stared at the dead screen, my mind racing. The phone wasn't turning off, but the app was gone, replaced by the blank, unyielding blackness. I tried swiping, tapping, pressing every button, but nothing happened. The app wouldn't open. The phone had become an inert object in my hands, as if the creature on the other side of the lens had taken full control. But the silence was louder than ever. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks came again, but this time, they were real. They came from behind the closet door, from somewhere closer than before. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't. But the sound was unmistakable. And then, the door creaked open. For long seconds, the phone was dead. I sat frozen, my hands still gripping the device, but it felt as though the world around me had stopped. The app had vanished, and in its place, the phone was nothing more than a cold, lifeless object. I tapped the screen repeatedly, desperately trying to get it to respond, but it remained black, silent, unyielding. I could feel the air around me growing thick, heavy with an invisible weight that pressed against my chest. The room felt wrong, too still. The usual hum of life outside the walls had disappeared, leaving only the oppressive silence. Time seemed to stretch on forever, and then, without warning, the phone flickered back to life. The screen blinked once, then twice, and finally, the app reappeared. But something was different. The familiar interface, the clean lines of the mirror's reflection, was gone. The app no longer displayed the room in front of me. Instead, it was a static black screen, except for one chilling detail: the mirror. I didn't know how I could see it, how it could be there, but I did. I saw the reflection, or what should have been the reflection. It was cracked. A jagged web of fractures ran across the glass, splitting the image into twisted, distorted segments. The crack wasn't just on the surface. It seemed to cut through the reflection itself, bending the reality on the other side of the glass, warping it into something unrecognizable. The pieces of the shattered mirror seemed to pulse with a sickly, dark light, and as I stared, they moved. The reflection was changing. Where my room had once been, now there was something else. The shadows were deeper, darker. The corners of the room seemed to stretch, as if the walls themselves were distorting, closing in, driven by something unseen. And in the center, just behind the broken glass, was something. A shape, a shadow. It moved with purpose, shifting just out of clear view. I couldn't quite make it out, but I felt it, its presence cold and suffocating like a hand around my throat. I dared not blink. And then out of the corner of the fractured mirror I saw it, a face, twisted and contorted. It was almost familiar, but I couldn't place it. The skin was distorted, the eyes wide and black, and those thin, long teeth, just like the thing in the closet, stretched into a grotesque grin. A grin that grew wider as the cracks in the mirror deepened, spreading like a virus through the image. The phone buzzed once more, and the app glitched. But this time, there was no message, only a sound, like something scraping against the glass. It was coming from inside the mirror. I stepped back, my body trembling, as I realized that what I'd been seeing through the lens wasn't just some app malfunction. It was real. It was inside my world now, and the mirror, the reflection, was its doorway. The thing in the mirror smiled. Today, at 3 AM, I received a notification. It was subtle at first, a small, unassuming banner at the top of my screen, just like any other app update. But this one felt different. My thumb hovered over the notification, hesitant as a cold shiver ran down my spine. The words stared back at me, bold and deliberate, almost like they were alive. Update available for Augmented. Ready to see what's really behind you? I blinked, staring at the message. For a moment I thought I might have imagined it, that I was reading too much into a simple update reminder. But I knew better. I had been using Augmented for a while now, and the strange glitches, the moments where reality felt just a little too warped, had never stopped lingering in my mind. Still, part of me, curiosity, or maybe something darker, pushed me to tap it. The screen flashed briefly, and I felt my stomach tighten as the update began to download. My fingers trembled, not just from fear, but from a strange anticipation, as if I had already made the decision to go further, to push myself into whatever it was that had been lurking behind the app all this time. As the progress bar filled, I glanced around my room. unease gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. The air felt thicker, heavier. The light in the room seemed dimmer somehow, though it hadn't changed at all. I was hyper-aware of every small sound. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant rustle of trees outside the window. Then, the app finished updating. The notification disappeared, replaced by the familiar Augmented logo. I opened the app without thinking, almost as if someone was guiding me, urging me forward. The familiar screen appeared, the one where you could toggle between the camera view and the augmented reality layer, where tiny fragments of light danced in the air like dust particles. But something was off. The usual clean interface now looked distorted, as though it had been stretched beyond its normal limits. A message flashed on the screen. Press the button to begin. My finger hovered over the glowing icon, and for a moment I wondered if I should stop, if I should just delete the app and walk away. But that voice inside my head wouldn't let me. I tapped the button. The camera view turned on, and my room appeared before me. But this time, there was something different. There were shadows, darker than usual, lingering in the corners of the room, moving just out of view, and the familiar floating particles? They were now twisted, shifting in ways that felt wrong, unnatural. But what caught my attention the most was the reflection in the mirror. It was there, clear as day, standing behind me. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, something the app had created. But as I stepped closer, I saw it, really saw it. The figure in the reflection was tall, shadowy, with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Its face was obscured by the darkness, but I could feel its gaze, cold, knowing. It was watching me. The app had never shown anything like this before, and that's when I realized the notification wasn't just an update. It was a silent warning,